Hi, good afternoon, and it's nice to be here, see everyone after a few years of not having done this. I will say the big room, when it was very crowded, gave me a scare, so I'm glad we're doing this outside. My name is Sumant. I'm one of the founders and managing partners at March Capital. I have been investing in technology for now more than 2 decades. But I often say this, and I'll say this again as I introduce Amir, whenever I have a question on technology that I don't quite understand, he's the first person I call. And he dumbs it down enough so that I can get 50%, maybe 30, 50% of what I need to get before I make an investment decision. So, and with that, I will say, having been an investor in Spark now for a few years and getting to know Amir and his team, it's been fantastic. And it's been fantastic because it's a company and a technology team that is really looking first at the problems a customer may be facing and then developing a solution versus looking at a technology that's going to try and find something to solve. So with that, maybe Amir, will start with you, just a little introduction of your own self, your background, and how you started SparkCognition and what inspired you to get here.
Thank you, Sumant. And first of all, thank you so much for your partnership. It's just been wonderful working with you, Jamie, Jed, the team, Hyun. It's been fantastic. I am a computer scientist by training. I was at UT Austin studying for my PhD back in 2000, 2001, and dropped out of the PhD to start my first venture-funded company. Ran that for a couple of years, sold it, did another one, and then fast forward in 2013, I started SparkCognition. There are two parts of computer science which have fascinated me since forever, one of which is artificial intelligence, which is where I did quite a bit of work, and the other is distributed systems. And so in the early part of my career, I would think of how to mash these things up and somehow come up with a solution to a problem that I thought was a real problem out in the world. The artificial intelligence, the evolution of interest in artificial intelligence has, as you know, gone through its ups and downs. And over many years, artificial intelligence was promised as a panacea. Expert systems would help us uncover disease and would help accelerate medical care and would basically build automated doctors. And when that didn't happen, there was, kind of an ice age as far as artificial intelligence was concerned, and interest waned. Around 2013, I had been appointed to the founding advisory board for IBM Watson, and I thought that technology had progressed to the level where applications of AI in the real world could now really be pursued seriously. And you could start to do things with AI that don't just optimize an ad click or don't just tell you the difference between a cat and a dog, but could actually make a difference in the real world with regards to the physical systems on which we depend, on which our world runs and functions. So for example, things that we never think about, the $100 million electric turbines that produce electricity for our neighborhoods, the pumps that move water and hydraulic fluids and allow the oil and gas industry to function, manufacturing and the optimization and electrical consumption in manufacturing and how that can be made more efficient. And then finally, the cyber threat, which the entire industrial sphere now faces, the cyber physical element of the threat. So what I conceived in my mind was really an operating system made of many artificial intelligence components that could apply across industry and make the infrastructure of our world more efficient. There's $100 trillion worth of it out there, and simply ripping and replacing all of it isn't an option. If that's what we're waiting for, that's never going to happen. And in the US, you see crumbling infrastructure in many parts of the nation. Part of it is because the only foil, the only mechanism that people have in their minds when they think about upgrading this infrastructure is rip and replace. But perhaps with artificial intelligence, I thought, with SparkCognition, we could make a difference. And so over the last 8.5 years, in partnership with Sumant and Jamie and the March Capital team, and of course, Boeing and Chicago Mercantile Exchange and Verizon and Temasek and numerous other excellent investors, and an amazing team that I have at the company, we've been able to build our capabilities and now show results across aviation, logistics, defense, manufacturing, alternate energy, oil and gas, numerous areas. So that is a very short introduction of kind of my own background, my passion with regards to computer science and AI, and kind of what SparkCognition is.
So maybe for the audience, give a little bit of insight into the company itself. Number of people, how it's grown, where do you see your business now, where do you see it a couple of years from now, and then we'll use some of your actual deployments and talk about how that's impacted the world.
Yeah. So, I'm very proud of the progress the company has made, and that's really a reflection of the board, the team, and the support we've had from investors. The first round that I raised was raised at a pre-money of 2.6 million. The Series D that we just closed on March 30th was at a post of a little over 1.4, and we raised $134 million. So in 8.5 years, that's 600-ish X. It's, I guess, not bad. The size of the company now from the point of view of people is a little over 600. Over the last year, we've also been very careful looking at businesses that are highly synergistic to our view and our vision of an artificial intelligence industrial OS. We've now successfully completed 4 acquisitions. Our most recent acquisition was a company with 75 people. So we were in the low 500s, and with this acquisition now we're over 600. And with this company, we have 100,000 computer vision systems, cameras, deployed in 16 countries. This is being used all the way in the oil and gas industry downstream, for example, at gas stations, in manufacturing, in logistics, in warehouses. So a lot of industrial and commercial applications of this technology. But we've also built natural language technology and predictive maintenance technology, and now all of this runs together on top of our unified stack, and we're getting closer and closer every day to that vision and that promise of an AI-powered industrial operating system.
So for me, one of the more fascinating use cases was the offshore oil one, and especially the unmanned. You want to give the audience a little insight into what we're doing there?
So, offshore oil rigs, if any of you have seen the movie Deepwater Horizon, these are massive platforms. They can cost, billions of dollars. And there's a very complex set of systems that are deployed on these offshore oil rigs. There's, in general, somewhere between 50 and 70 independent systems, pumps and other forms of rotating equipment, etc., electrical equipment that's on this rig. And as you know, many of them are out in the middle of nowhere, right? Offshore oil rigs in the North Sea or in the Gulf. Weather can be really antagonistic at times. So reliability, safety, the prevention of environmental disasters, this is paramount. And as you saw in that film, one environmental disaster can mean essentially a large oil and gas company teetering at the edge of bankruptcy. It's a really, really major hit, and it's also a massive environmental catastrophe. So how do you prevent things like that? So we have deployed our software now, not on 1, 2, 3, but a large number of rigs with some of the largest operators in the world. And our software has been the first solution that's been able to build unified models that really think of the rig as a single unified entity. Like in the human body, you have a heart and lungs and legs and arms and muscles and eyes. But there's this notion of sort of your overall health. And it could be that your hands feel fine, you're not short of breath, and somebody says, well, how are you feeling? And you might say, I'm still not feeling good. Well, what is it exactly? And sometimes it's difficult to point out what it is exactly. This is the problem in many complex systems. It's the same case in oil rigs. So with this AI system, we've been able to create modeling technology that can automatically detect issues that aren't even at the level of an individual subsystem, even by the manufacturer, wouldn't be deemed an issue. So this hidden layer of issues and problems that no one can identify, we can track and then
and
use
days
AI
in
to predict.
advance of it actually
Days
becoming
in
an
advance.
and so you
Yeah.
can solve it before it happens.
Yeah.
Another example, what are we doing for the Air Force?
Yeah, so in fact, my colleague Logan Jones is here in the audience. He runs a government business, and he's doing some amazing work. And one of his big deployments is with the United States Air Force Air National Guard with F-16s. F-16s, as you might know, are the most numerous fighter aircraft in NATO, across all of NATO. And availability of these aircraft is a key input to planning decisions. I need to move these 5 aircraft over here. What's my sortie generation rate? How will the base that moved these aircraft, how will that get impacted? What are my logistics challenges? There's a web of complex things that are connected with these decisions. And availability for our warfighters is a very, very key element. So now they're using artificial intelligence built on SparkCognition's platform, deployed by Logan's team, which is, of course, security cleared and has all the necessary regulatory and other elements to engage directly with the services. And the F-16 story is actually a very successful one. And this year, Logan is actually looking to scale that quite significantly because that same technology applies to commercial aircraft as well.
Shifting gears a little bit, when you think of the world of AI and how it's evolved, what do you think people still don't quite understand? What is it? What's the biggest misconception in AI? Or many?
I think my sort of macro observation is that in most things that require time and patience in order to realize the fullness of their potential, people generally don't have that time and patience, and they make an observation somewhere along the curve, and they say, because this one point along the curve isn't really where I want this technology to be, therefore it must be nonsense. The thing is, artificial intelligence came about in the 50s, the Dartmouth conference, and okay, so it's been 60, 70 years since we've been working on it. But let's be clear about what we're working on. We're working on a system that in many areas can exceed the potential of the human mind, which is an object that took 14 billion years to evolve. So 60 years is not that long, and another decade or two will see tremendous amounts of progress. So that's something always to keep in mind. The second thing is that we are doubling the amount of data that we as a species produce every 2 years. So since the dawn of man up until, let's say, 2000, we had X data. And then between then and now, in the last 2 years, we have another X. That is mind-boggling to imagine. And anyone that thinks that we will be able to keep up with that data in any way, doesn't understand data analysis. And so artificial intelligence hasn't even begun to be applied to the things that it will derive value from and find signal from. Businesses that we haven't conceived of will be built on the insights derived from artificial intelligence. I mean, in healthcare, there's a company called Nielsen. I'm sure you have heard of it. Nielsen's model is you send people, knock on people's doors, do these research surveys, etc., and they make a lot of money doing that. Now, can you imagine with drones and satellites and machine learning-based imagery and analysis of even open cameras and all of the stuff that's already out there, totally anonymized? No one's interested in facial recognition. It's just about a car went by or a person went by and they went in the proximity of this particular shop. You can extract all the types of insights that an entire company like Nielsen provides. So the applications haven't even started. There is some sentiment around artificial intelligence. Is it overhyped? And people that think that, I wonder what their understanding of AI is. They might think AI is a product or it's some widget. AI is a science. It's like physics or math. And so when large companies say, we have an AI buyer and an AI budget, like, do you have a budget for physics? Do you have a budget for physics-related purchases? And if you don't, then why do you have a budget for just AI? I mean, you're using AI as a mechanism and as an underlying enabler to go solve problems that you couldn't solve in any other way. So many misconceptions.
But having said that, one, I think, learning for me, and I'm hoping we can share this with the audience, has been how do you sell this science as a product to your customers and they can derive value from it? And specifically to these industrial companies that don't really know how to consume technology, right? So what's been the learning as we've gone down building a business here, Amir?
I think the key learning, honestly, and there's always exceptions, right? But one can't focus on the exceptions. I'll give you the rule, and then we can come back to the exceptions. My going into building SparkCognition, my view was, look at us people from tech. All the time we're talking about disruption. And what does disruption mean? It's just a slightly polite word for saying I'm going to destroy your business, right? I'm going to come in and apply technology in a way that basically undercuts you and you're done.
It's called efficiency.
Yeah, there you go. But is there no better way to collaborate with large industries that have accumulated so much domain expertise over time, and can we not provide them technology? And over these last 8-10 years, it's been sort of like an education in sociology, and part of it is that once people become enmeshed in an organization that's large, the structure and gravity of the organization, even when the individual realizes that this is the direction I want to go in, the structure and gravity of the organization prevents them from doing such things. So you can engage with companies without talking about AI and just talking about how much money you're going to save them or what safety issue you're going to resolve for them and so on. In my experience, when you talk to large established companies that have been around for 100 years and you tell them that you're going to solve this thing with AI and here's what AI can give them, they're generally not interested. They're more interested, I think, if you cut the AI out and you just talk about what you're doing. Now, that kind of makes sense, and it also kind of doesn't make sense. And I'll tell you why it doesn't make sense. Because I don't think the CEO or the C-level leadership of a multi-billion-dollar company with 2, 3, 400,000 employees should have no time or no understanding or no interest or no curiosity or no motivation to spend any time trying to understand the future. And in fact, this to me is the great undoing that in many of our great American industrial companies we are now beginning to see. We have had over decades over-indexing to let me save money this quarter, let me save money next quarter, forget the innovation. It's not just about AI. Over the decades, whatever has presented a tool of innovation, that's always secondary, tertiary, and what's important is what can I deliver this quarter. And one small observation, and then I'll go back. When I came to America, the question that I asked myself, I wasn't fleeing a conflict, I was totally comfortable. I came to America because I asked myself the question, what country, what platform can I be a part of that would help me most effectively contribute to the future? I wanted to build the future. Where do I go? What is the best platform that would allow me to do that? And in 1996, when I asked that question, unequivocally the answer was America. Where the hell else? There's no other, there's not even a number two. This is where you go. And since then, what I found is that it's no longer as easy to answer that question. The Wright brothers flew their aircraft, and in about 60 years, Boeing had the 737 already in the sky. It's the same 737 essentially that we fly today. Within about 55, 60 years. It's been about 55, 60 years since the 737 flew. Think about that. Innovation in so many key areas where our country, where the US was at the absolute apex, has all but become a flat curve. Now, who is going to innovate? I don't know. I mean, large companies that have vested interests in just doing what they're doing because they make money and the interest is
I'm going to have
earnings.
an observation on this. If you
Yeah.
sell to industrial companies, you get jaded very quickly. So let's now talk about the future. Decentralized systems. And this is something you've tried to explain to me, and it took me a while to figure it out. And even now, I think I'm 20% of the way I need to be to make intelligent decisions on it. What's the reason? What's the benefit? What do you see happening here? And then let's also talk about your sub that you're doing the token
Yeah.
project on.
So with decentralization, obviously, you know, these days the market's down, and I'm sure everyone that has investments is hurting if you're tech oriented or if you have money in crypto, no matter where. So this is the time when you look at everything and you say, "I told you so," or you know, Harry told me so, or Elizabeth told me so. Obviously, this won't work. But the thing is, many things won't work, many things will work. But when you take that lens away and you say, okay, well, fundamentally, what is decentralization? See, today there's 4 companies, 5 companies that basically own all your data, right? They own all your data no matter what you do, no matter how much you want to not use a social network or whatever, they own all your data. In fact, to the point where there's companies that can buy on the third market, your third-party market, where your phone has been, right? Even if they don't have a tracker, there's companies that sell that data today. So where you've been in the last 3 months, this data can be bought. Everything can be bought in terms of privacy. 4 companies essentially have all of it. The other thing is that the capacity to deploy an application, when you are a startup and you want to deploy an application, how do you do that? Well, you deploy it somewhere in the cloud. Who owns the clouds? 4 companies. When you go deploy your application on the cloud, you aren't making money for a year or 2 years or 3 years on the application that was your idea for which you were bringing customers. The cloud is making money day one on your application. Secondly, they're also learning everything there is to learn about usage patterns on your application. And there have been many examples of where an application was deployed on the cloud and then the cloud provider said, oh, this is a pretty cool idea, let me go do my own. So do we want to live in this world? Do we want to live in a world where we have an oligopoly of distribution? Because running an application on the cloud is distributing that application to the world. Do we want to live in a world of control where our data is not owned by us? We don't even know where the hell it is. So decentralization, I think, is important because it gets you away from these things. The other thing that people talk about, maybe my last point on decentralization, there's a lot more to say, but the last point on decentralization is people say, well, you know, this crypto crap, I mean, it's a scam, right? It's a pyramid scheme. The only way that it goes up...
I have said that, by the way.
You have you? Well, thankfully not to me. But you know, that's the kind of the vicious criticism that you see. It's a pyramid scheme, and the only way that it goes up is when more people put money in, but it doesn't really do anything. And that's basically nonsense, because if you think about what crypto is, it is a promise to do work in a network that you, the holder of that token, believe in. It's an economy. It's a microeconomy. And if you believe in that and you think that the number of people that will do work in that economy will grow, then the token, the IOU that you can trade in for a unit of work, the units of work will increase over time.
With that, let's talk a little bit about where you see in the next 3 to 5 years stuff that is being innovated on impact the real world. Because we're talking today, it's about AI in the real world. You have a bunch of customers you've deployed on existing systems, whether it's planes or lots of different systems. What changes in the next 2 to 5 years?
One of the things that's happening with AI models is that they're becoming more general purpose. And there are many theoreticians, there are many AI professors, practitioners that feel that this path of making models more and more general by simply making them larger is not really going to get to human level intelligence. I don't really care, because these models are getting more and more general. You've heard of the model that can play chess. You've heard of the model that can defeat humans at Go. You've heard of models that can describe pictures. Well, there are now, over the last month, two models, one from DeepMind and one from OpenAI, that combine all these things. A single neural network that can control a robot, that can answer questions about anything you want to ask it, that can label images, that can draw paintings given a text description, that can play games. In fact, every Atari game, one network. So this has never happened before. And now, of course, whenever you deconstruct something, you can always say, oh, of course, this is trivial, right? But the point is that right before it happens, it's the hardest thing ever. And this is the history of AI, where hard things get solved, and the moment they get solved, there's a peanut gallery around you that says, oh, this was the most trivial thing ever. Of course, everyone, why didn't you do this, right? But there's a tremendous push towards general purpose models. And I think these will become useful. Will they lead to human level intelligence? No, I think other things will also be required. But for the first time, I'm seeing progress in these areas outpace my own expectations. Now, they're simply not being dropped into products that you and I and this audience can use. So we don't have a visceral daily experience of them, but they're there and they're working in an amazing way. These general purpose models really fascinate me, and I think this is one area of innovation among many others.
And there's another school of thought that would say go deeper and build very context-aware models, and those are being deployed at scale in industry today as well. So I think we have about a minute or so left. I'm wondering if anybody in the audience has any questions for Amir or generally around AI. Anyone?
Yeah. So we have a joint venture with Boeing, a 50-50 joint venture. It's a company called SkyGrid. And the problem that you're speaking about is simply air traffic control for a world where millions of aircraft are in the sky. And obviously, it's not just air traffic control, it's maintenance, it's certification, it's all of these things. So none of this can be done with human beings because we can barely keep up with the fleet of manned aircraft that we have now. So we at SkyGrid have developed a platform that solves exactly these problems. We have a partnership with Raytheon. We're tied in with Raytheon radars. We're partnered with a large number of data providers. And AI fuses all of the information across these layers and automatically routes and controls drones, prevents collisions, and does a whole bunch more. We're also now approved by the FAA to programmatically submit AI-created plans for a drone to the FAA's computers and receive an electronic approval so that the flight can be initiated with essentially no human intervention.
By the way, this is not trivial. And obviously, it's taken us many years to get all of this lined up and get done.
Yes.
Any other questions for Amir?
The argument there is generally that,
Can you repeat the question?
The question is, do you see AI as anti-decentralization if AI gets into the hands of large companies? AI is a very powerful, tool. It can be used as a tool, and you can extract patterns and process large amounts of data. So clearly, if a large company collects a huge amount of data and then uses AI to process it, they'll be able to get to insights more quickly. And so the answer to that is decentralization, where you don't allow these repositories of the type that these large companies have to materialize in the first place. But what I'll tell you there is that, look, technology is agnostic. If you stop innovation because you think that somebody might use it for bad, then the only use for that technology will be for bad, because the people that have that intent will not stop developing it.
But isn't it true, Amir, that even these decentralized systems of today run on public cloud?
No, they don't run on the public cloud.
They don't? So they don't have any access to the data that's running on top of these.
No, you can certainly take, I mean, they're on the internet. So you certainly can transfer data that might have existed in a cloud repository and put them on, let's say, a chain. And then, you know, the blockchains that are running themselves, they don't contain masses of data. So for example, if you had like a 100 gigabyte video, okay, that's not what goes into the blockchain. What goes into blockchain is essentially a reference to that video, and that video might then go on a decentralized file system like an IPFS, which is another crypto project. So that's kind of how it works. And you can certainly move data between the cloud and decentralized, but decentralized networks don't need a Google or an Amazon to work.
And for us as investors, you know, you watch for these thematic changes and new trends that give rise to new applications that then give rise to investment opportunities that'll be commercially viable. And we're very early in these innings, but it's super exciting and hopefully as powerful as the cloud has been over the last decade plus. One thing I'm going to leave you with, something that Amir talked about $1.2 trillion of new equity value was created in cloud software companies over the last 12 years, 14 years, since 2008. But more than 4 times that was captured in the top 3 public cloud providers. Even in today's valuation, almost 4 trillion went into new equity creation in those 3 clouds. So they did benefit a lot from all of this innovation. Yeah. Amir, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us here, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.